Okay, part 8. The second year fellowship gathering. Had the person sitting in the place of royalty at the end of the room been an sovereign archnoble, he would have been much older. It seemed safe to conclude that he was indeed a prince. Nobody told me a prince was going to be in attendance, though. Is that his little brother? I cocked my head. If my guardians had known about this, I was sure they would have warned me, or at least told me to be on guard. Rather than wearing black as the Academy standard, the small figure, the word small, came unbidden to mind every time I saw him, was dressed in red and white. The divine colors of winter. He was at least wearing a black cape to match that he was from the sovereignty, but he stuck out nonetheless. Even Anastasius had worn mostly black. So it hadn't occurred to me that royals were allowed to break the dress code. Here are your seats, the servant said. Just like last year, the small hall had 4-person tables arranged at equal distance apart. We were taken to the 3 tables for Ehrenfest, at which point Wilfried took a seat at the table to my left, and Charlotte took hers at the one to my right. Brunhilde pulled back my seat for me before resuming her position, standing behind me with my guard knights. Hartmut, meanwhile, was seated beside me as my scholar. Hartmut, did you know that a member of royalty was attending this year? I asked in a hushed whisper. He discreetly shook his head. I did not, and it seems we are not the only ones. Many of the other duchies seemed just as surprised, so we can assume that nobody was informed. It was nice to know I wasn't alone in my ignorance. I always had the feeling that I was missing out on important information since I didn't spend much time in the castle, but that wasn't the case here. However, Hartmut continued, I recall there being rumors in the Royal Academy last year that a royal was going to be baptized. Word said it was the son of the king's third wife, the half-brother of Prince Sigiswald and Anastasius. If these rumors were true, he would only have been baptized this autumn, so that means he's not even of age to come to the Royal Academy yet. He was baptized this year, I asked. Someone must know about him then. Nobles in Ehrenfest debuted during Winter Society, but royals are officially debuted during the Spring Archduke Conference. I expect that he has not had a formal debut yet. That explained why he was so tiny. I thought that maybe he just looked small because he was seated so far away, but this made a lot more sense. That said, why is there a newly baptized prince here in the first place? Yeah, because don't you have to be 10 to come to the Royal Academy? Hartmut had only confused me further. Thankfully, once the Archduke candidates from all the other judges were seated, a sovereign scholar introduced the small prince and explained the circumstances. This is third Prince Hildebrand, the scholar said. He was baptized this autumn and welcomed into the royal family. Under normal circumstances, he would be attending the academy much later, but the king instructed him to attend this year as part of his royal duties. Huh? To summarize, there was a rule that there must always be at least one member of the royal family attending the Royal Academy. If there was no one of proper age, a graduated adult would be set instead. It would have been more proper for Anastasius to return, but it seemed that he was exceptionally busy with his duties as a second prince. He needed to fill with mana the land that he had been given for his marriage, and the royal magic tools that had fallen out of use. In other words, Prince Anastasius is so eager to marry Lady Eglantine that he's putting his all into getting his land ready, and refusing to return to the Royal Academy. That has to be it, right? I mean, reviving those old magic tools has to be a harder job than being stationed at the Academy. Now that he was an adult, Anastasius had chosen to work hard over the winter rather than stay at the Royal Academy. Hildebrand was being thrown into the deep end as a result, having to attend the Academy so soon after his baptism. He was merely here for political reasons, however. It wasn't as though he would actually be going to classes yet. He would presumably be spending most of his time in his own chambers. I wonder why this rule was put into place. Is it for emergencies or something? Maybe to ensure someone's always there to settle disputes? That's a possibility. Last year, when Dunkelfelder had made a fuss over my bringing Schwartz and Weiss out of the library, Anastasius had been contacted and arrived almost instantly to arbitrate the dispute. He had also spoken to Solange and me later on to learn more about the situation. There certainly are a lot of people here who know what kinds of problems might arise. Royals must always have their hands full with this stuff. And for the royal family to be sending a literal 7-year-old to the Royal Academy, they must be in dire straits. Once the scholar's announcement was over, everyone agreed to prepared to give their greetings, as they had done the year before. Again, Klassenberg was first. It seemed not to have any Archduke candidates now that Eglantine had graduated, so an older-looking boy stood up and went to greet the prince instead. The event continued as expected. The representatives of each duchy would stand up to greet the royal, and then go down the aisle to greet every duchy of a higher rank than theirs. Dunkelfelder was the next to go up, then Derwankel, whatever. Only after the 9th-place duchy had greeted the prince was it our turn. Wilfred and Charlotte stood up while I was helped down from my chair. Wilfred then looked at Charlotte and me. Rosamund and Charlotte, let's go. Wilfred escorted us to the princess table at the far end of the hall, moving slow enough for me to keep up. When we reached Hildebrand, we knelt down, crossed our arms, and bowed our heads. Prince Hildebrand made me pray for a blessing in appreciation of the serendipitous meeting ordained by the harsh judgment of Abeglabe, the god of life. You may, came a distinctly childlike voice. Up close, I could see that Hildebrand had bright purple eyes and a faint blue tinge to his silver hair. He also had a cute face. Perhaps a boy wouldn't much appreciate being called cute, but he looked especially young, as expected considering that he had been sent to the Royal Academy so early. Not to mention, unlike the arrogant expression of royal dignity that Anastasius had so often worn, Hildebrand was wearing a bright smile that actually put me at ease. He was far from the archetype of the exceptionally manly man. Well, he's 7. What do you expect? He looks adorable! Rosamund's right, he's cute! He's adorable! With the prince's permission, we poured mana into our rings and granted a blessing. I made sure to add just a sliver of mana, all the while eyeing Wilfred and Charlotte to make sure I didn't go overboard. Ferdinand had insisted that I not give in to my emotions and offer an excessive blessing like I had did the graduation ceremony. Okay, perfect. I nodded to myself, having successfully managed to give a blessing as small as my siblings. Hildebrand then asked for us to raise our heads, at which point Wilfred continued the greeting. It is an honor to meet you, Prince Hildebrand. We are Wilfred, Rosamund, and Charlotte of Ehrenfest, here to learn to become proper nobles fit to serve Jürgenschmidt. May the future be bright. Hildebrand looked at each of us in order, although he seemed to regard Charlotte with particular interest. Ooh, that could be interesting. I am told that Ehrenfest's Archduke candidates are exceptional, that one came first in class and another achieved the rank of honor student, all while aiding their classmates in raising the overall grades of their duchy, he said briskly in his higher-pitched voice. King Trargal has high hopes for all of you. Do continue your efforts. I can sense that he was completely focused on repeating the exact words the adults had instructed him to say, and as someone who had memorized all sorts of phrases for ceremonies, I knew just how hard he must have worked to reach this point. I wanted to tell him how well he was doing and to keep up the good work, but that seemed rude to say to a prince. I decided to settle on an expression of gratitude instead. We thank you. And so, our first meeting with Hildebrand ended without incident, thank goodness. It admittedly caught me a little off guard since Anastasius had gotten all up in my face about being a fake saint the year before, but we headed to the next table nonetheless, the table belonging to Klassenberg. Once again, Dragona, the goddess of time, has woven her threads together and blessed us with a meeting. This is Charlotte, my youngest sister. She was attending the Royal Academy as a first-year student, Wilfred said. May our futures be bright. Charlotte went on to give her first greetings. Wilfred hadn't introduced himself, and I had been told not to introduce myself either, so I could only assume we had already introduced ourselves to this person the year before. Perhaps they were an Archduke candidate rather than an Archnoble. I can't exactly ask them which, so I'll just check with Hartmut later. According to Hartmut, they were not an Archnoble, but rather the son of Ob Klassenberg's second wife. He explained that I had greeted the boy last year, but I couldn't remember him at all, so I responded only with a simple smile. I mean, how am I supposed to remember someone I've only ever greeted once? I know. Especially when I've never really expected to see them again. But for Lady Eglantine to have not reintroduced you to him despite your friendly relationship, it may be the case she did not interact with him either. It is not unusual for a child of a second wife to rarely socialize. Oh right, that reminds me. I'm pretty much never spoken to Nicholas. Archnoble and archducal families generally took second wives to stabilize faction politics, compensate for a first wife unable to produce children, or simply increase their number of children. It wasn't uncommon for half-siblings to barely interact. That sucks. The next duchy for us to greet was Dunkelfelder. We headed over to Lestalot and Hannelor's table when Wilfred spoke to them as our representative, and Charlotte performed the blessing given at first meetings. Lady Hannelor, I said, thank you ever so much for the splendid Dunkelfelder book you lent at me. Even the Ob asked me to express his thanks to you. I told her how stunned I had been to learn that Ob Dunkelfelder himself had delivered the book at the Archduke conference, but at the same time, how grateful I was that it was being sent so early meant I had a lot of time to read it. Hannelor blinked several times. It must have been heart-stopping to have received a book from the Ob himself. Father loves to surprise people, and, I often find myself in a cold sweat after one of his tricks. I am relieved that he did not bother you, she said with a troubled smile, her light pink pigtails swinging as she shifted. Ob Dunkelfelder had apparently proclaimed that he would deliver the book personally to surprise me. He sounded like someone who loved mischief, but for him to have lent us a book that might as well be considered a treasure of their duchy, he was probably a really good person too. I would hope so. The offering of a book could never bother me, I replied. I had a splendid time with it, and as thanks, Lady Hannelore, I intend to let you borrow a book from Ehrenfest. I thought it would be nice for us to trade new books after returning the ones we have read. I thank you ever so much, Lady Rosemine. I am quite looking forward to it. Hannelore and I exchanged a smile, enjoying our fun conversation, at which point Lestalot gave me a doubtful look. Someone in Ehrenfest managed to read that book, he asked. Yes, I was awestruck by the depth of your duchy's past, I replied. The fact that so many of their stories involved battle maniacs who kept on fighting until they won more or less explained why Professor Roffin was so insistent on challenging us to dinner rematches. He had so much history at his back. Humph, as you should be, Lestalot snorted. We are completely unlike Ehrenfest, a pitiful duchy with only a mere 200 years of history. Brother, Hannelore exclaimed and gave him a reprimanding tug on his sleeve. She then looked at me, her cute red eyes washed with worry. She was no doubt concerned that Lestalot had offended me, but I just smiled at him and nodded. It is true our duchy's history pales in comparison to yours, and that our history books are thin in comparison, I said. That is why I so appreciated the book I was graciously lent, and I would certainly love to read more of Dunkelfelger's splendid books. My intention was to lead into a lengthy discussion, during which I could review Dunkelfelger's book and get even more books from them, but Wilfrid cut me off, and Charlotte gave a subtle pull on my sleeve. Perhaps this could be discussed when we come to lend Dunkelfelger our book, Wilfrid said. We should not tarry too long when others are waiting. Oh, right, we're in the middle of greeting the duchies. Yeah, you are. I was so excited about being reunited with Hannelore and so eager to speak with her that I had forgotten where I was. I promised to invite her to a tea party soon, and then made my way over to Drewonkel's tables. Lord Wilfrid, Lady Rosemine, I congratulate you on your engagement, Adolphine said. I did out in my ears when Father returned from the Archduke Conference with the news. Adolphine was speaking as the duchy's representative, but also were my classmate Ortwin and two other Archduke candidates. Her wine-red hair had flowed down to her chest in majestic waves, had a pleasant sheen, almost as if she had used Rensham. Oh. They made it. They made the Rensham. Great. A careful examination of the duchies as a students revealed they all had glossy hair too. Upon seeing my eyes move, Adolphine stroked her hair and smiled. No, it couldn't be. I only gave them one bottle. They must have analyzed the Rensham I had given them at the tea party. The actual process for making it was simple, so I figured the production method would be exposed eventually. But this was much sooner than I expected. Drewonkel being a duchy of mad scientists might just make it a bit more terrifying than I expected. I looked up at Adolphine and swallowed hard. Meanwhile, Wilfrid and Ortwin seemed to be having a much more positive conversation, talking about the games they played for socializing. Here's to another good year, eh, Wilfrid? You can bet on it. I can show you how much better I got in Gwenin. For some reason, Adolphine was giving me a meaningful smile. Lady Rosemine, the scholars that we sent to the Archduke Conference returned with quite a excited frenzy, she said. It seems that Ehrenfest has magic tools that even commoners can use. Scraps of paper that move on their own, worming their way toward any larger pieces. Quite interesting. Even our scholars were taken aback by the concept. Oh, it is nothing that deserves so much attention, I replied with an evasive chuckle. I was starting to feel they would dissect anything they managed to get their hands on. They would. I did not observe any such paper in the Royal Academy, and it was not presented at the Interduchy tournament either, was it? Adolphine asked. Is there perhaps a reason for this? Perhaps it is because our op considered it unworthy of publicizing, I replied. It wasn't at the Interduchy tournament because commoners made it, and nobody at Ehrenfest really uses it as a magic tool. I can't say that, though. It is surprisingly difficult to grasp what is and isn't normal in one's duchy, Adolphine said. This is something I have learned well since coming to the Royal Academy. Lady Rosemine, I pray that we can spend much time together this year. You ain't getting a hand on my stuff. Or in other words, you want to wring information out of me. Okie dokie. Time to contact my guardians. That didn't take long. Great. Charlotte, don't you even try it. I share your prayers, I said with a smile, but I could feel my face stiffening. Adolphine's eyes turned to rest on Charlotte for a moment before looking comparatively at Ortwin. You are a first year, are you not, Lady Charlotte? Adolphine asked. I foresee us being close friends as well. I would be honored. It feels like someone extremely dangerous just targeted Charlotte for something. Ferdinand, help! I moved to the next table, hoping to protect Charlotte from Adolphine's gaze. Once we had finished greeting the 4th and 5th duchies, it was time for us to speak with Arensbach the 6th. Oh no. Only Detlinde was there as an Archduke candidate. The small girl we had seen at Lambert's wedding wasn't present. She was about as tiny as me, so as expected, She wasn't old enough to attend the academy this year. Too long has passed since our last reunion, Detlinde said. You all seem to be doing well. How has Aurelia been faring in Ehrenfest? We have been ever so worried that she may not be fitting in, haven't we, Martina? She turned her attention to a girl who looked a bit like Thule, her attendant, based on where she was standing. Lady Bettina seems to have been in contact, but we have heard nothing from my sister Aurelia. I've been so worried about her, Martina said, lowering her voice sadly. She was similar enough to Thule that just seeing her upset made my heart ache. Aurelia is enjoying her life in Ehrenfest, I said. She has prepared a new veil, and we have had tea party together. Isn't that right, Charlotte? Indeed, Charlotte agreed with a smile, having met Aurelia at the dyeing competition. She is a sweet and positively delightful person. Martina placed a hand on her chest in relief, while Detlinde blinked several times, her dark green eyes betraying her astonishment. Aurelia? Sweet? She muttered to herself. Why does that come as such a surprise? In what world is Aurelia not sweet? I guess they're just basing it on how she looks. I also blinked in confusion, sensing that the Aurelia we knew was somehow different from the one Detlinde was familiar with. On that note, Detlinde said, moving the conversation along swiftly, I realize I did not properly congratulate your engagement at the Starbind ceremony. Please allow me to rectify that. Congratulations. She spoke with a soft smile, which was weird to say the least. It felt as though she was genuinely blessing our engagement, and she looked so friendly that I wanted to ask what all that nonsense last year was about. That she was even acknowledging me alongside Wolfried seemed incomprehensible, and in truth, it actually made me feel a little uncomfortable. All of you are my cousins in Ehrenfest, she continued. I hope we can get along well. I really don't like her. Just something about her. The 7th, 8th, and 9th duchies following Ahrensbach were visibly on guard against us, considering that our rank had risen so suddenly. They had scarcely even noticed us last year, but now they were shooting us warnings and insulting us through euphemisms. Hate to break it to you, but Wilfried won't pick up on those kinds of slides at all, and they won't make me shrink back either. We finished greeting the higher-ranking duchies, which meant it was time for the lower-ranking duchies to begin greeting us. This was annoying in its own sense. The 11th, 12th, and 13th duchies were especially hostile toward us and spoke with empty smiles since we had pushed them all down in our ascent. To translate a few of their insults, luck and chance do not last forever. Good times are but fragile illusions. They will shatter sooner or later. Do you intend to speed through your classes once again? I only hope that your grades do not suffer as they have before. How pleasant. Of course, we needed to protect our dignity and our reputation, so we offered responses that essentially meant our success is not an illusion. We will ensure the good times continue. We thank you for your encouragement, I said to one of the students greeting us. Please look forward to seeing our grades published. I believe you will find them quite impactful. After exchanging various other insults with smiles on our faces, it came time for us to speak with Fullmetal. This was Charlotte's first time meeting Rudiger. Her eyes widened in surprise, and she glanced several times between him and Wolfried, presumably noticing how similar they looked. However, since Charlotte had the same indigo eyes as Rudiger, she seemed to resemble him even more than he resembled Wolfried, at least from a color perspective. I was sure she could easily pass herself off as his sister. Not me, though. I don't share their blood. Rudiger must have noticed the way Charlotte was looking at him because he offered a smile. He knelt down, crossed his arms, and then bowed his head. Lord Wolfried, Lady Rosemine, once again, Dragonar, the goddess of time, has woven our dress together and blessed us with the meeting. And the same for you, Lady Charlotte. May I pray for a blessing and appreciation of this serendipitous meeting ordained by the harsh judgment of Avaglave, the god of life. You may. Rudiger gave Charlotte a blessing and exchanged greetings with her. Then once that was done, he looked at Wilfried. I heard about your duchy's archduke candidates taking the lead in spring prayer for the sake of the people, and suggested we do the same in Fullmetal. As a result, we were able to secure a larger harvest than usual, he said. That's good! It had apparently taken Rudiger a lot of courage to tell his family that he wanted to go to the temple, but after hearing that Wilfried had done the same in Ehrenfest and with greater results, the archducal couple had decided to try it. Perhaps out of desperation, if nothing else. Rudiger's mom is Sylvester's older sister, after all. I can see the similarities between them at least a little. Thanks to these new efforts, Fullmetal had apparently seen a larger harvest, and the increased tax revenue had made things easier for the duchy. Hope has returned to the once blink eyes of her nobles, Rudiger said with a slight pleased smile. It brings me more joy than anything. Your advice is much appreciated. Mother was overjoyed as well. As a duchy on the losing side of the Civil War, I knew that their archduke had been executed, but their duchy surely must have suffered in other ways as well. As one example, I was aware of Aurelia being treated unreasonably harshly in Ahrensbach due to her mother being from Fullmetal. This had no doubt made bringing wives and husbands into the duchy that much harder. In truth, it was impressive that they had managed to rein themselves into getting involved in religious ceremonies. Or resign themselves into getting involved in religious ceremonies. I had charged eagerly into the temple to get my hands on books, but they had scorned it their entire lives. Sir, their decision to work with the temple, despite their disdain, was probably because they were so desperate. Any port in a storm, as they say, but still. I hope that our friendship with Ehrenfest can remain so firm, Mardigar said, carefully eyeing me for my response. He looked a lot like Wilfrid when I had told him to test Frembeltag at the tea party before teaching them our methods. We are cousins and neighbors. A friendship is only natural, I replied, causing both Mardigar and Wilfrid to exhale in relief. Once the greetings had finished, lunch began. The soup actually tasted good this year, perhaps because the chefs had adopted our recipes. But the sweets, well, once again, they were no better than clumps of sugar. Ooh, the epilogue. Whoop, whoop, whoop. Oh, we get it from Hildebrand's point of view. Hildebrand stood in front of the teleportation door. Today he would be going to the Royal Academy. He looked up, quaking with excitement, only for his head attendant Arthur to brush aside the bangs that had fallen onto the young prince's forehead. Do remember you are attending the academy as royalty, Arthur stressed. I know. This is my first duty as prince, given to me by father, Hildebrand replied. He had tried to form a serious expression as he nodded his understanding, but he couldn't contain his curiosity for the new, unknown place he was heading to. Just what awaited him beyond that door? Now we may go, Arthur said. The door opened before the prince's bright purple eyes. His retainers encouraged him forward, and when he took his first step, he found himself enveloped in silence. A hallway stretched into the distance, its walls lined equidistantly with doors with letters and numbers written above them. It was completely unlike anything he had seen in the villa where he and his mother had stayed prior to his baptism, or the villa he lived in now. But there were so many people when I first went to the royal palace. As a child of the king's third wife, Hildebrand had been raised in his mother's villa, and he had not ventured outside its walls prior to his baptism. His mother's family had on occasion come to visit, but he was used to little more attention than that. Thus he could remember the overwhelming crowds of people he had seen during his visit to the royal palace, as though it had only been yesterday. Hildebrand knew that the Royal Academy was a place for royal and noble children to learn from their 10th year to their coming of age, and he had implicitly assumed that everyone would greet him with enthusiasm. An empty hallway was completely unexpected. There's nobody here, he muttered. The advancement ceremony is underway, so the students and professors are all in the auditorium, the guard knight taking the lead replied, making the prince realize he had spoken aloud. This is a welcome respite for us guard knights, as there is less danger to fear. It seemed that everyone was gathered elsewhere. It was only logical that Hildebrand wouldn't be attending the advancement ceremony, considering that he wasn't a new student, but it was like he was being left out. Feeling a little disappointed, Hildebrand walked down the murky hallway with the equally spaced doors until he reached into the hallway, this one with windows. There was a lot of snow outside, much more than he was used to seeing outside his own villa. He pressed his lips together. The piling snow was almost like a metaphor, signifying that he was going to have far more duties here in the Royal Academy. Are you nervous? Arthur asked, seeming worried for him. You appear quite rigid. I simply feel the weight of my responsibilities, Hildebrand replied with a nod. I am here as my royalty, even though I was only recently baptized. He thought back to when the king, his father, had instructed him to attend the Royal Academy. It had been near the middle of autumn. It will be a heavy burden, but I ask that you oversee the Royal Academy as royalty. Hildebrand received this request from his parents, who were visiting the villa they had granted him. He knew not how to respond, so his head attendant Arthur spoke up in his place, albeit in a troubled tone. Prince Hildebrand has just been baptized. He has not yet to even have his debut. After a child was baptized in the royal palace, it was standard procedure for them to be debuted as new royalty during the next Archduke Conference. There was no precedent for a royal carrying out public duties before their debut. In truth, I spent much time debating whether to send you or Anastasius, the king said to his son. However, Anastasius has much more important work to do than standing in position at the Royal Academy. I would like you to do this job for me, Hildebrand. If this was the conclusion the king had come to after a lengthy internal debate, there was no way that mere retainers could protest. They could only accept the order in silence and support their charge as best they could. Though, in the end, I will mainly be restricted to my villa. Hildebrand was told to avoid contact with the students as much as possible. He was too young to determine good or bad on his own, so it was possible the students would attempt to exploit him to some end or another. Royalty simply had that much authority to their name. Not that Hildebrand fully understood this. He had spent his life in his mother's villa and rarely interacted with this outside world, so he did not completely grasp the power he wielded. It seems to me that Mother and my retainers have much more power than I do, but they say otherwise, so... This is the small hall, Arthur told Hildebrand as they entered the room where the fellowship gathering was going to be held. There were tables all around, and the prince was led to the one nearest the back, where royalty sat. There are more tables than duchies, Hildebrand observed. Indeed, that is because some duchies have more than one archduke candidate, Arthur explained. There was one table per candidate. It was not uncommon for half-siblings to oppose each other and wish to hide information from one another, and this allowed each candidate to sit at their own table with their retainers. Will you be sitting beside me, Arthur? Hildebrand asked his head attendant. Arthur shook his head. Much like when you have your meals, Prince Hildebrand, I will remain standing behind you. From there, I can offer advice and serve you your food. The guard knights weren't going to be seated either, but perhaps the scholars would. Hildebrand looked up at his scholar Dankmar, who answered that he would indeed be seated, but underneath the table. What? Apparently this would allow him to discreetly provide information about the duchies and tell the prince what to say to the candidates. Oh, okay. That explains it. I already memorized the greetings and what to say to each duchy, Hildebrand said. He had been completely immersed in his studies ever since being baptized. He didn't need anyone hiding beneath the table telling him what to say. I understand just how hard you have been working, Prince Hildebrand, but it is possible that your mind will go blank while you are actually carrying out your first public duty, Arthur said. It would be best for the fellowship gathering to end without you needing Dankmar's assistance, but it is the job of retainers to formulate triple-layered plans to ensure that failure does not occur under any circumstances. Very well, Arthur, the prince replied. Still, I will ensure that we'll finish the fellowship gathering without Dankmar's help. Hildebrand steeled his resolve and started repeating his lines to himself until word eventually came that the advancement ceremony had concluded. Dankmar immediately got in position. He was an instructor who usually wore a strict frown, so seeing him hiding under the table was a source of great amusement. Hildebrand couldn't help but keep glancing down at him. Prince Hildebrand, face forward, not down at Dankmar, Arthur warned. You will only embarrass yourself should the students discover his presence. Hildebrand faced forward just as the door to the small hall opened. Lord Hansford of Klassenberg I has arrived. People wearing black clothes and red capes entered the room. It was Klassenberg's archduke candidate and his attendants. Lord Lestelot and Lady Hannelore of Dunkelfelder II have arrived. After a brief moment, the blue-caped students from Dunkelfelder appeared. They had more people than the duchy they followed, likely because they had two archduke candidates. The entering archduke candidates all widened their eyes upon seeing Hildebrand. It was likely that few duchies even knew he existed, since he hadn't yet been debuted. The stir of surprise only intensified as more people entered the room, and it showed no signs of calming. Hildebrand adjusted his posture, feeling a little uncomfortable, only to have Arthur immediately whisper in his ear. As the attending royal, he was not to move, since all eyes were on him. I've been scolded and the greetings haven't even started yet. Hildebrand was stricken by worry over whether he would actually be able to perform the greetings properly, but fleeing was not an option. He just had to sit with as much royal grace as possible. Once all the duchy's representatives were seated, Hildebrand was introduced to them. The prince's circumstances were explained, and once the archduke candidates learned he was a royal who had not been debuted, their searching looks turned into ones of curiosity. Perhaps because they were young students, their gazes were much more direct and emotional than those of the sovereign nobles. Not that this made Hildebrand feel any less uncomfortable. And so the greetings began. The archduke candidate from Klassenberg, the highest-ranking duchy, was the first to stand and approached Hildebrand's table with his retainers. Prince Hildebrand, may I pray for a blessing and appreciation of the serendipitous meeting ordained by the harsh judgment of Abiglave, the god of life? You may. As a third prince, Hildebrand was used to being the one to receive rather than give blessings during first meetings. His replies were short and impossible to mistake, but he couldn't help but smile in relief when he delivered one properly. You may raise your head. It is an honor to meet you, Prince Hildebrand. I am Hansford of Klassenberg, here to learn to become a proper noble fit to serve Jürgen Schmidt. May the future be bright. Right, Klassenberg is Lady Eglantine's duchy. Hildebrand had no issue recalling who Lady Eglantine was. She was engaged to his half-brother, Anastasius, and had attended the third prince's baptism. She was kind, beautiful, and positively exuded grace. Lady Eglantine participated in my baptism ceremony, Hildebrand said. I anticipate that Klassenberg will do its part as family of royalty and act with the responsibility that the first-rank duchy must hold. I am honored. The group of red capes left, this time being replaced with blue capes. Hildebrand's mother had been born in Dunkelfelder II, and her family had at times visited the villa where he once lived, so the prince knew Lestelot and Hannelore. They had likewise attended his baptism ceremony. This was not a first meeting for them, so Lestelot said the words for an entirely unexpected but nonetheless pleasant encounter. I am overjoyed that our threads were woven together once again, despite Abiglave, the god of life, wielding such power. I am surprised to see you in the Royal Academy, Prince Hildebrand, Lestelot continued. We had not been informed of this. I had not yet received Father's orders at the time of my baptism ceremony, the prince replied. My mother has asked me to look first to my family for help should anything happen. Let us pray no such incidents occur. Hildebrand wasn't particularly close to Lestalot or Hannelore, but it came as somewhat of a relief to see people he had met before and could consider family. Next was Durankel III, and a group of emerald green capes approached. This duchy had 4 Archduke candidates, but Hildebrand only knew one of their names. Dankmar and the others had said he only needed to remember Adolphine, the fiancée of his half-brother Sigiswald. Still, I might actually need Dankmar this time. Hildebrand swallowed nervously, but Adolphine was the one to step forward for the greeting. Dankmar did not need to provide any assistance. I am told we will meet quite regularly due to your engagement with my brother Sigiswald, Lady Adolphine, the prince said. I imagine I will be in your care on many an occasion. May our threads be woven together. Indeed, may our threads be woven together, Adolphine replied with a smile. She then headed to the side of the hall with the other Archduke candidates. Students of the other duchies came up in groups, one after another. Hildebrand greeted the greater duchies and higher-ranking middle duchies without much effort due to their closer relationships with royalty, but over time his knowledge became increasingly fuzzy. By the time the ninth duchy had come up, he needed Dankmar to provide some assistance from beneath the table, but he managed to give a royal greeting nonetheless. Oh, there's a child about as old as me here. No, she just looks that way. Jeez, why does everybody... Of course everybody's going to assume, but whatever. Hildebrand blinked in surprise when the Archduke candidates from Ehrenfest X stood up. One of their Archduke candidates was a girl who looked as though she had been baptized last season, like he had. It was heartwarming to see her older brother and sister slow down to match her walking speed. What were Ehrenfest's years again? Hildebrand asked. They have 2 second-year students and 1 first-year, Dankmar replied. The second-year female Archduke candidate is the Lady Rosemine we discussed. Oh, really? You discussed Lady Rosemine? Ooh, I wonder what they said. Hildebrand thought back to what he knew about Ehrenfest. It was a duchy notable for having Rosemine, known as a wild card figure of sorts. She had supposedly attacked a professor with her high beast, revived the heirlooms of royalty, thrown the royal palace into chaos by guiding Anastasius and Eglantine into a relationship, and missed both the interduchy tournament and the graduation ceremony due to her abnormally poor health. Anastasius, the only royal who had met her personally, had even described her as a dangerous individual who comes up with unthinkable ideas that cannot be dealt with normally. But underneath all that madness, she was extremely competent. She had come first in class the year before and was supposedly the source of all the trends coming from Ehrenfest. How bizarre. Hildebrand had struggled to know how much he needed to remember when he was learning about the duchies with Dankmar and the others. Anastasius had given detailed reports on the incidents this Rosemine had caused, but most of what he had written was in relation to his time with Eglantine, so the scholars hadn't known how trustworthy it really was. I think Lady Eglantine's hairpin was made in Ehrenfest too. Hildebrand recalled the unusual hairpin that Eglantine had worn at his baptism ceremony and looked over the Ehrenfest group. It was then that he realized all the girls were wearing hairpins, even the retainers. The 3 Archduke candidates knelt down, crossed their arms in front of their chests, and performed their first greeting. Hildebrand had been warned to stay on guard against Rosemine's blessings, but nothing in particular happened. His attendants were more drawn to how glossy the hair was. That's another of their duchy's trends, as I remember. Hildebrand recalled that prior to his baptism, his mother had wanted this Rinsham product and had instructed the sovereign merchants heading to Ehrenfest to return with some before the end of summer. He smiled at the memory and instructed the 3 Archduke candidates before him to raise their heads, after which the boy, Rosemine's brother, spoke as their representative. It is an honor to meet you, Prince Hildebrand. We are Wilfried, Rosemine, and Charlotte of Ehrenfest, here to learn to become proper nobles fit to serve Jurgensmith. May the future be bright. No, Rosemine is the one who's that's Charlotte. This light-haired, indigo-eyed girl must be Rosemine. Hildebrand looked at the 3 Ehrenfest Archduke candidates, deducing their names by order of their apparent ages. Both of his parents had advised him to take care of the unusual influential Rosemine of Ehrenfest, and that Anastasius had warned him it was possible she would reply to him with blatant hostility at their first meeting. If she did that, Anastasius had said for him to settle things peacefully if possible. I wonder what I should say if she does seem hostile, though. Despite his fears, Hildebrand put on as peaceful of a smile as he could, all while taking care not to stare specifically at Rosemine. You were staring at Charlotte, you idiot. Oh, he's going to find that out. I am told that Ehrenfest Archduke candidates are exceptional, that one came first in class and another achieved the rank of honor student, all while aiding their classmates in raising the overall grades of their duchy, he said. King Tragar has high hopes for all of you. Do continue your efforts. In the end, the 3 candidates left without incident, much to the prince's relief. He noticed that he had tensed up without realizing it, so he let his body relax back into his chair. Well, that ended without anything serious happening. Thank goodness. Now that the lengthy greetings had been exchanged and everyone had eaten lunch, the fellowship gathering was finally over. Hildebrand was the first to rise from his seat and exit the small hall with his retainers. He started to relax once there were so many eyes on him, which of course earned him a quiet rebuke from Arthur. You must remain regal. Until you get back to your dang room, then you can relax all you want. Hildebrand straightened his back again, recalling that he had been told to maintain his royal demeanor without fail, even as he returned to his villa. He walked down the hall with the doors enchanted with teleportation magic, looking for the one that led to his own villa. It was easy to tell the doors to the duchies apart since they were numbered based on rank. The royal villa, however, was marked with the elements of the various gods, and the fair prince, young as he was, found himself unable to distinguish them. It wasn't that he couldn't read them, but rather that reading them took him some time. The words were also written above the door, so he had to keep looking up as he walked, which quickly made his neck ache. Arthur, Hildebrand said, seeking help, but Arthur shook his head. You must be able to return to your villa through your own power. I remember everything and I can read them, it just takes me a while, Hildebrand protested, clearly frustrated. He then returned to looking at the letters above the door. Darkness makes my father's villa, light marks his first wife, water marks his second wife, wind marks my mother's, fire marks Sigiswald's, life marks Anastasius, and earth marks the villa they gave me. Hildebrand was struck with the temptation to visit his mother in her villa to tell her how hard he had worked today, but now that he had been baptized and given his own place to live, he would no longer see her without requesting a meeting first. Soon enough, Hildebrand found the right door and returned to his villa. He let out a heavy sigh, unable to ignore the loneliness he felt. But Arthur didn't chastise him this time. Instead, he simply chuckled and prepared a glass of warm milk, into which he stirred a dollop of honey. The sweet taste made the prince feel as though he were back home. Did I handle the fellowship gathering okay? Hildebrand asked. Indeed, Arthur replied. You handled the greetings quite well. Hildebrand had worked hard to complete the first duty his father had ever given him, but at the same time he had been terrified that he might fail. Only after receiving approval from his head attendant did the prince allow the emotions stirring in his chest to finally surface. The small hall sure was filled with people, Hildebrand remarked. Only the Archduke candidates and their retainers were in attendance, Arthur replied. Arthur replied, so the turnout was actually quite small in comparison to the total number of students. It seemed that there were more men nobles and lay nobles than there were Archduke candidates their retainers combined. Hildebrand couldn't even imagine that. Arthur, I should have been wearing black too. I was the odd one out, Hildebrand muttered, looking down at his clothes. Everyone in the small hall, students and teachers alike, had worn black, which made him feel exceptionally ostracized. You are not yet officially attending the Royal Academy, Prince Hildebrand, so you cannot wear black. You must be satisfied with the royal black cape. That reminds me, there was someone else who looked like me. If she hadn't been wearing black, she wouldn't have looked like a student at all, Hildebrand said, thinking back to the abnormally young-looking girl who had greeted him alongside her older brother and sister. She had hair like the night sky and eyes like the moon. Okay, so he was thinking of Rose. Okay, never mind. A very distinctive appearance, and she had worn a dark yellow cape from what he remembered. What duchy wears that cape again? Airvest, was it? He then remembered that Rosemine had also been at the gathering. She hadn't seemed anywhere near as dangerous as Anastasius had said. But then again, lessons hadn't started yet. Who knew what would happen this winter? I wonder whether the young girl is as skilled as her older sister, Hildebrand muttered, unaware that he had mistaken Charlotte for Rosemine. Oh. He did. Okay, so he did. Alright. Okay, dang, it's only been 39 minutes. Wow. Or should I wait and do this one last one? Oh, stop it.